Hi everyone. Today we're talking about how we can build C-suite trust in artificial intelligence or AI. What's the role of trust in the boardroom? And what can actuaries do to help our organisational leaders understand and trust AI tools? Joining us for this discussion is Colin Priest, an experienced actuary who's held CEO and general management roles. Colin's championed data-driven initiatives across many industries, and he's passionate about how humans and AI can work together. Colin has been involved with many projects around AI ethics and governance and generously uses his skills to support cancer research. I was inspired by Colin's recent talk at the Pro Actuary Summit, so I've invited him here today to continue that conversation and share some of his stories about building C-suite trust in AI. Colin, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me here. This is something I love chatting about.
Excellent. Well, I'm really looking forward to having this chat with you today. I mean, you've had such an interesting global career, Colin, and you've also got a really unique skill set spanning not just actuarial and data science, but also marketing, communication, and education. So, yeah, I'm really looking forward to hearing your stories in today's conversation. But first, I want to ask you the question I ask all of my guests. Colin, how do you use your actuarial superpowers to make a difference in the world?
If I'm going to put it simply, it's to simplify and democratize complexity. That's the quick one. The slightly longer is I'm trying to protect stakeholders and guide them through the complexities of real life. Um, and in many cases, it's because things can't be known. And that is really where actuaries have the greatest strength, is dealing with the uncertain.
Hmm. That's fantastic. I love that. Yeah, very much uncertainty, and to be able to simplify that and work through it and understand it. I mean, what a great superpower.
Yeah, and more than simplifying, democratizing it. It's to
Democratizing it.
get people engaged and involved and not just scared.
Mm. And there is a lot of fear, especially around data and data science and AI. Especially we've got this new
Mm.
technology and so many different things that are changing the way that we work. I know you've had a long career in data science, Colin. How did you get into data science in the first place?
Well, it wasn't on purpose, well, at least not initially. And it came about because of office politics and Sun Tzu's The Art of War.
Mm.
Uh, Eclectic mix again. This is just the way my life goes. Many years ago, I was running the personal lines business for an insurer. And we'd go into these senior management meetings, and the marketing manager would always make me look bad. And it's pretty easy for a marketing manager to make an actuary look bad, by the way. And so he'd blame me for sales being less than budget because
Wow.
I set the prices. Oh, you've set the prices too high, Colin.
Ah.
And I'd go, no, I haven't. No, no, no. And he'd always win. And make me look bad. And I got out of one of those meetings and I was really angry. I was an angry young man. I'm too old and tired to be angry now, by the way. Uh, and I slammed my office door and it's like, I can't do this anymore.
Mm.
What am I going to do about it? And that is probably one of the reasons why you see me, my eclectic thing, is that I'm a firm believer in if you've got a problem, go and fix it. And just out of interest, I'd been reading Sun Tzu's The Art of War.
Hmm.
People rave about it. I think, they've been in Wall Street, and
Yeah.
I better read this. Let's see what they're going on about. And I'm sitting there going, you know what? You know why I keep losing? It's because I let the enemy choose the battleground.
Mm.
His battleground was talk
Right.
and bluffing and convincing people of stuff, no matter whether it was true or not.
Mm.
I go, well, if I'm going to win, I need to stop fighting on that battleground.
Mm.
Now, as an actuary, what are my strengths? My strengths are data and objectivity and dealing with complexity. Right? How could I use those and make that the battleground? And I stop and I'm thinking. So now I'm turning from being angry into being, oh, this is now I've got something interesting to solve. Yeah, hey, one of the things you must have discovered about actuaries, we love solving problems.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
How to think. And just earlier that year, we'd set up a call center where we started selling via phone, and where people would call in. So before then, everything was agency based. And I didn't get to know what business we were losing out on. But the moment we got a call center, I know everything we quoted on. And then I know which ones got turned into policies. Well, wait a sec, I could analyze that and then do price comparisons and go, is there any relationship between our price versus competitors and whether people take up a quote? Or as economists would say, is what's the price elasticity?
Yeah.
And this was, of course, this is 30 years ago. This is in the mid 1990s.
Yeah.
And no one was doing it at that time. No one had thought of doing that. And so that's what started me on this journey. It's like, I'm going to start doing data-driven decisions. No more of this, who's the most convincing. I want us to make the right decision. So I did do the analysis. And because I didn't want it to be controversial, I got some of his team, the marketing manager's team involved, and they got excited because this is like, oh, this is leading edge stuff. And we're going, you know. And we did the analysis and we discovered the price didn't matter within about 5 to 7%. You know, there's a margin within that as people get close enough.
Okay.
You have to be noticeably out for it to make a material difference. And so I went back to the next meeting after we'd done that and gone, you know what? It shows that I'm not priced too high. And if anything, because of that margin, we could move prices up.
Yeah.
Now, we didn't, but this is me putting him back on the back foot now.
Yeah.
So it was all about office politics. But the next after that was, well, let's look at who renews or who lapses. Is there a pattern to that? And then I moved further on. And as every time I'd come up with a new problem that I wonder if data could solve that. And it got more and more complex. And then I started doing stuff in other industries when I went out on my own as a consultant, because you'd know very well as a consultant, if someone comes to you with money to solve a problem, and then they've got some data, they go, yeah, I'd love to do that. I did stuff in the pharmaceutical industry and the telco industry, and it's so interesting seeing totally new problems. But if you go back to the basics and ask the generic questions, it's basically more of the same stuff.
Yep. That's so good. So it sounds like actually one of your superpowers, Colin, was knowing what your superpowers were and choosing that battleground to play in, to be able to not just try and go in and, you know, fluff around with, you know, trying to argue with the marketing manager or be persuasive, but to go back to your superpower base of being able to use data and to be able to use that to support your argument.
Yeah, and then don't abuse your superpowers as well. So I didn't want to then marginalize the marketing manager. You know, he's still got value. He's still a human being.
Yeah, of course.
Let's try and bring his team in. So if it goes well, he can take some credit for this.
Yeah.
That's also very good from a persuasion perspective, by the way. He's not going to argue against something that his team has been working on.
Yeah. 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 And ultimately, we're all working towards the same goal. We've just got different ways of doing it and different superpowers in our arsenal to bring out and do that on the battleground. So yeah, what a great story, Colin. It's funny what you say about the marketing manager too, because it was such a classic exam question, wasn't it? You know, that the marketing manager thinks you need to do this. You know, what do you say?
The only thing worse was one of your junior actuarial assistants suggests this solution.
Yep.
Discuss. And it wasn't really a discuss question, it was critique.
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
You know it's wrong when it came from a marketing manager or a junior actuarial assistant.
That's right. You knew what the answer was. You just needed to navigate your response.
They had to just come up with the reasons why.
Yeah. Exactly. Very good. Okay, so we're an interesting move into data science because of office politics, but also because you saw the power of using data for good and its application, its broader application in other industries as well, which you've used that quite broadly. So our conversation today is centered on building C-suite trust in AI. But Colin, can any of us really trust AI?
No, there's a simple answer. But, yeah, no, but you can't trust anything. Full stop. I'm a skeptic. And skeptics are not just naysayers. They're just trust something to the extent there is evidence to justify that trust.
Mm.
So look at the evidence. And so, unfortunately, though, the way our brains work is not like that. Well, the way our brains work with trust is completely different. We look and we go, is it aligned with my interests?
Mm.
Does it behave in a predictable manner? And can I influence it? That's what really affects human trust.
Mm.
Does it, or does it? And the slightly one that comes in is more data driven. Does it have a history of being trustworthy?
Mm.
And we do that with people. Now, we don't notice we do it with people
Mm.
because we've got specialized bits of our brain. They're called mirror neurons, where we literally just can figure out very quickly whether we trust another person.
Right.
We don't sit there and think about it. Sometimes we do, but in general, we can do that in a fraction of a second.
Mm. We're not thinking about it. It's just a quick judgment that our brain supercomputers do for us in the moment.
But when we get to AI, we can't use that.
Mm.
It doesn't behave in a way that's intuitive for us.
Mm-hmm.
Partly because it's new, and partly because we haven't evolved. Now, with other humans, we evolved it. It was a necessity to survive.
Mm.
So, if we talk about trusting AI, it's flawed. Nothing is perfect out there, but people aren't either.
It's a good
And
point.
so I keep reminding people of this. And one of the ways I deal with people trusting AI is I go, let's just stop for a second. What if you hired a person to do this? And we go through the process of how would you trust a person to do this? Then we go, okay, could we apply the same process to an AI?
Mm.
Now, AIs are going to make mistakes, but humans make mistakes all
True.
the time as well. The lesson from this is don't blindly trust and don't blindly reject.
Mm. Mm.
Keep things in proportion to how trustworthy something is.
Yep. I like your point there about, the evidence. We sometimes think that evidence, that logic, that rational approach should be enough to convince us, should be enough. Going back to your example about taking the data and demonstrating that the price didn't really matter by that much. But then the other side of it is that if we're trying to persuade humans don't always, as much as we like to think that we're all rational and logical and based on the data, it's not how humans work. That's not how we work.
We're the exact opposite of that.
Mm.
In some cases, AI is more trustworthy than humans
Mm.
because you can train it to not have those human cognitive biases.
Mm.
Now, in other cases, and then some of the more prominent ones, is because we've accidentally trained it to replicate our human cognitive
Yeah.
biases.
Yeah. Yeah. We're built in our own biases.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So important that we can't trust anything, but also that concept of trust as humans and whether that's based on fact or whether it's based on something else is quite an interesting idea. So if we think about a boardroom of humans, what role does trust play in the boardroom?
I would say at that level, almost everything is about trust. If you're in the C-suite, you're not involved in the details of the business.
Mm.
You have to trust because you've delegated.
Mm.
So you are trusting that your team is doing things right. Now you are checking, trust but verify.
Yeah.
But you can't totally verify that. You don't have the bandwidth. And plus, it's horribly inefficient and unproductive to micromanage your team. You've got peers doing other bits for the business, and that will interact with what your role is. You have to trust that they are doing what they say they're going to do, and that that you have a shared goal. Remember that first thing. Do you have a shared goal? And that's one of the biggest things that matter to us, and it comes out in our tribalism.
Our tribalism.
Now, when we get to AI, though, they look at it and they see a machine, not a human. They go, that's not my tribe.
Right. I can't relate to that.
Yeah.
You're not like me.
Worse still, if you're a C-suite, you got there because you're really good at influence.
Mm.
But they look at it, I can't influence the machine. It's a machine. It just does what it says what it's going to do, regardless of what I try to do to influence it.
Mm.
So research has shown that it matters who in the C-suite sponsors an AI project.
Right.
And so the worst people to sponsor an AI project in terms of success rate are the CIO or CTO
Yep.
and the CEO.
Okay. Interesting.
It turns out that if they sponsor the project, it's twice as likely to fail.
Twice as likely.
And that's not because they're incompetent or they're deliberately trying to do it.
Mm.
It's just that AI is not like IT. IT is all process driven.
Mm.
AI is more like organizational change.
Mm.
It is about people, it is about processes, it is about building trust. And if you deal with it as purely process, it's not going to work.
Mm.
So it gets really complex up at C-suite. They're used to being able to be powerful and influential,
Mm.
but this AI, they're going, I don't understand it at all. I can't influence it at all. And I don't know whether it's aligned with me.
Mm. Mm. So interesting, that concept of persuasion, the interplay between having data-driven decisions, but also the human aspects of persuasiveness and influence and
Yeah.
trust.
So I'll give you an example of that. I once, I worked for a tech company in the US a few years back,
Mm.
and one of our customers was a very big European insurer.
Okay.
And we'd done this trial project, and I thought it had gone very well. They got me involved because I was one of the few actuaries in the company,
Right.
and it was, this was about mortality rates, churn rates, and there was a few things like that. And they needed someone like me that could talk to the actuarial team and translate the jargon back and forth, because data scientists took their own jargon, actuaries took their own jargon, neither understood one another. They got me involved. And we finally come up with something and everyone's excited, but it needs sign off from the chief actuary.
Right.
So we present to the chief actuary and he hates it. I could tell. It was a video conference because I was in Singapore, he was in Europe,
Yep.
and I'm watching his body language. I'm listening to his words. I'm thinking, this isn't going to get through. Now, my job is to get it through because we need sales. That's part of what I was doing in my role. And he kept asking this question, which was, but this is experience analysis is a regulatory requirement. I can't allow AI to do experience analysis.
Right.
And so one of my colleagues answered that with a very technical answer about why this was so much better than what they'd been doing. And I've got to say, there was no way anyone could disagree with that technical answer. It was so much better than what they'd been doing.
Right.
But that didn't budge him an iota. And then I realized that the problem wasn't the facts.
Yep. He needed more
The
than the
problem
facts.
was he hadn't realized that he had the final say on what the assumptions are for reserving.
Right.
And because it was also new, he thought it was just the AI chooses the reserving out of this.
Just does it.
Yeah. And the moment I realized that, now I'm going to ask him some questions. So the other thing is, because it was new, you've got to always, if you want trust, bring it back to something people do trust.
Mm.
So I asked him, this is me, I don't go straight to convincing him. I ask him first, how do you do your current experience analysis? How does that influence your reserving assumptions? So, we do this and this, but we've got to override this and this. I'm going, and then you've got to say something that's about their identity, because if you do anything that challenges someone's identity, they're going to say no.
Yep.
And I go, so it's important that you have the final say and that you override this with human judgment. Yeah. I go, it's no different here. Think of the AI as just the pure experience analysis part of your whole process. We're just using a more complex analysis, but it doesn't choose what you do. You get to do that. And he
Yeah.
says, could I smooth it over a few years? And I go, yeah, that's about credibility.
Mm.
Oh, and all of a sudden it's totally different
Yep.
because we've linked it to something he does trust. So now he's got a framework for finding trust,
Yep.
and we've empowered him to control it. And C-suite, it's about control and
Mm.
influence.
Mm. So it wasn't just about the facts, even though the factually correct answer was fine.
Yeah,
That wasn't the hesitation. That wasn't the concern. The concern was, but how can I override this? Will I be able to have some say in this? Or is this
yeah,
just a black box that I don't understand? And
yeah.
so
And
when
his
you,
other concern was embarrassment. How do I deal with the regulator?
mm, yeah, how do I justify assumptions to the regulator if I didn't actually set them myself
Yeah.
or override them
And
or how I don't understand how they've
what he
come.
didn't want to say was he didn't want the regulator asking him how, and he said, I don't know. No one
Mm.
wants that to happen.
Of course.
But if you give them a framework for that, that's just a more, it's just a slightly newer form of experience analysis.
Mm.
Oh, okay. And we allowed for this, this, and this. Oh, yeah. But I still control it because it's an actuarial thing. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So you were able to use your strong communication and leadership skills to be able to to be able to build trust in the AI experience investigation approach in that situation. But Colin, many actuaries find it hard to build their communication and leadership skills. So how did you do that?
Through horrible, horrible trial and error. I don't know how many times I've lost, particularly earlier in my career, I've lost the trust of C-suite
Yeah.
because I didn't use those skills. But the best things about actuarial education is the control cycle. You can apply that to more than actuarial problems. You can apply that to communication and trust. Sit and go, after a meeting, where did I gain or lose the trust of my audience? Why? Go and learn some more stuff about how humans actually make decisions. Stop assuming that people are rational, including yourself, by the way. Some of the times you go, why did I say that?
Mm, mm,
What motivated me to say that?
mm.
I don't want to say that next time.
Yep.
And so, particularly early on in my career, I had learned the wrong things by my actuarial education. I would answer in high detail the technical side of something because that's how you pass an actuarial exam.
Mhm.
But it's not usually the real question. So I remember I took over the reserving of an insurer. This once again a very long time ago in the 1990s. And at that time, there weren't many actuaries in general insurance. I was the only one in the insurer I worked for.
Right.
And so I'd taken it over. It had been done by consultants before. I'd had a little bit of trust built up with the CEO because I'd saved him from losing his job the previous year when the consultants wanted to up some of the reserves 50%. And it wasn't really the consultant's fault, although the CEO still will probably to this day say it still is. It's because I'm sitting in the meeting and the actuaries are talking about this, this, and this. And I see the CEO freaking out. I go, wait a sec. They've assumed something that's not true. And
Ah.
so I stick up my hand. I go, did we at any point of time tell you that we totally changed our case estimation process in the last year? Oh no, what did you do? And I'm going, this, and this, and going, would that change your assumptions about this? Oh yeah. It's once again, reading a room does matter.
Yep. Yep.
But this time it was me, and I did things a different way to the consultants, not because they were bad. It's just that I knew things they didn't, and I also have my own style.
Mhm.
Now, what I didn't know about the CEO was that he used to be an econometrician early on in his career.
Okay.
And so I rock up with a totally new reserving method, and he goes, what's your inflation assumption? I go, there's none. But there has to be one because he'd already seen one. He was used to seeing inflation assumptions and discussing them because he understood those.
He
Now,
knew how to talk about inflation.
yes, he knew how to talk about that. Now, me and my naivety, he says, well, where is the inflation assumption? I went on with this 10-minute bookwork answer
Mm,
about how it's implicit within the chain
mm,
ladder
mm,
model.
mm.
and some technical stuff about why I found no correlation between economic inflation and claims inflation. I answered the wrong question.
Yeah. You gave him the technically factual, accurate actuarial response that you could put on an exam question, an exam paper.
It would have given me very good exam marks, by
Would
the
have,
way.
would
But it got
have.
me nowhere with the CEO because he just asked me the same question again right after the
Mm.
10-minute rant that I'd gone on.
Mm.
And I was there like a deer in the headlights. It's like, oh, what am I supposed to say now? I've said everything I know.
Mm. What
Now,
did you
looking back at that
do?
now, I look and I go, he just needed to feel in control, even though legally he was not allowed to have any control. He needed to know something about it and say that he'd understood and agreed with something in it. Like I said, that's
Mm.
probably for him was what gave him trust. If there was
Mm.
something in there he understood and could agree with,
Mm.
or
Mm.
thought he had control over, even if he didn't.
Mm. And could understand what you were saying, make sense of it in words and terms that he was familiar with.
Yeah, and could have a conversation about it instead of just passively accepting something.
Mm.
C-suite don't like passively accepting
Mm.
something.
Mm.
It's only after I got on C-suite that I sort of started realizing what it is that C-suite want.
Right.
And one of the beauties of having had so many hats in my career is it makes it so much easier for me now to get into someone else's shoes and go, what is it they're really after here?
Mm.
What
Mm.
window are they looking at the world through?
Mm. And they're such powerful questions to ask ourselves in any human interaction because we are all so different. We do all have a different set of values and experience and background and perspectives and language. That to understand where someone else is coming from is a really great place to start when you're trying to work out how to land your message with them.
Yeah, and it's difficult when you're young because you don't have enough experience to
Right.
know all these things.
Mm.
And my only advice is do your best to learn.
Mm.
Do your own control cycle, get feedback.
Mm.
Now, particularly if you can find a mentor, I
Mm.
was really lucky in my early career. I had a couple of good managers who took time aside to mentor me, to help me understand what others were really thinking about. And it's like, so, it's afterwards I discovered the guy's an econometrician originally. That
Yeah.
was my boss. And I'm chatting to him about how the meeting went. I go,
Mm.
now I get it.
Yeah. Yeah. So some good trial and error there, but also some intentional reflection on how things
Yeah.
worked, how things could be better, and just getting that experience in different roles and just seeing things from different perspectives has helped.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you're lucky, try and tag along with someone who is good at this and try and then mirror what they do, or afterwards go and
Mm.
ask them, why did you
Mm.
do this and this? Write down questions to ask as you sit
Mm.
through a meeting.
Mm. Yeah, some great tips. Thanks, Colin. So I want to come back full circle to marketing. I know you talked about sort of your challenges in the early days with the marketing guy, coming in, not being able to kind of have that debate about what was right. But I know you've had some broader experience in marketing as well across the various roles that you've had. So I'm keen to hear what you've learned from marketing that could help actuaries build trust in the boardroom.
So I ended up in marketing because of the data science. So I
Right.
got into data science because of marketing, but I more and more was pushing data-driven decisions about customers,
Okay.
because last century, so much of it was just driven by people's opinions and it was
Mm.
all very subjective.
Mm.
Nowadays, you will not survive as a large business if you can't do that. And I did it from an altruistic thing. I want to improve the customer experience because it's a win-win.
Mm.
The company then does better out of that as
Mhm.
well. Um, More and more as I did this, I realized that the data-driven stuff was starting to get fairly good, but the subjective, the creative, the communication, the design of customer experience wasn't. It was mismatched.
Right.
And so I'd been doing the data-driven part of it, and then the marketing, the more soft skills marketing people would go off but I'd get really frustrated with what they'd come up with. And so 10 years ago, I was working in a tech company, and the CEO had come from a data scientist background, and he did not trust marketing people at all.
He'd had the same experience you'd had back in the day.
Yeah, yeah, and it took a lot. And like his greatest compliment to me ever, 'cause I started writing content because I just got so frustrated. It comes back to if there's a problem, get off your ass and fix it yourself.
Mm,
Don't go and complain about it. Don't expect others to fix it. So I started writing some of the content.
mm.
And the greatest compliment he ever gave me was, I hate your content far less than anybody else's. And I've learned to let you just go and do
Yeah.
it. So I started learning about that. And then if you're going to write content, you can't write it like a technical writer. It's not a file note. It's
Mm,
not an exam answer.
mm,
The very first thing you've got to learn is grab people's attention as
mm,
soon as you can with
mm,
something that matters to them.
mm.
Too often, we start with what matters to us.
Yep.
Um, and so, so many times when I was the junior and I spoke about all the technical bit of a chain ladder, that's what mattered to me.
Yep.
I didn't stop and think what matters. But in marketing, that's the whole essence of marketing.
Mm,
What matters to the customer and
mm,
how can you align what you're offering with
mm.
what matters to them?
Yep.
And so I had to get a lot. I know I'm naturally terse. I know I said I spoke for 10 minutes on something, but I still only just finished exams at that point of time. But I'm naturally a terse communicator. I've had to actually learn to speak more instead of a single sentence answer. But then if you're trying to do marketing communication, particularly like a blog, you cannot write a long blog.
Well, you can, but nobody will read it.
No one will get to the end. Yeah.
Yeah.
So the very first paragraph has to be something exciting that'll
Mm,
make them want to read further.
mm.
Then it gets more difficult. Now you've got to keep them reading.
Got to hold their attention once you've caught it.
Now you've got to convince them that reading further will deal with one of their needs.
Mm.
And it turns out there's a hierarchy within that. Absolutely at the top of that is you're going to deal with something that's painful to them.
Yep.
Because we're hardwired to deal with pain first.
Mm-hmm.
But we always think, opportunities. No. People are more driven by pain than opportunity.
Mm, mm.
So if you can find something that's painful to them, that's best. The other thing I've had to learn is to talk in narratives. Tell stories. Don't just tell the facts. No one is really swayed by the facts. But on the other hand, facts need to be there because there's a section in our brain, now we get into neuroscience, that is literally dedicated to making excuses to justify what we've already decided.
Right. Okay.
And so we'll make a decision. They go, well, where are the facts? Let me twist those facts slightly. Oh, yeah, I made the decision because of those facts.
Right. Right.
And so the whole art of communicating came out of marketing.
Yeah.
And so it moved me much more into focusing on how to be a good communicator.
Mm.
I'd done some public speaking when I was young, but different forms of communication required different skills and different focuses.
Mm. And it sounds
And I had to learn to be visual.
visual. Mm-hmm.
I'm naturally more oral. Like many people that do a STEM degree, I play a musical instrument.
Mm.
So I'm oral.
What do
Now,
you
my
play?
wife, on
What do
the
you
other
play,
hand, is
Colin?
visual. Yeah. My wife is visual. She's a fashion designer.
Ah.
And I've had to learn to communicate with her in a visual manner. So she used to think everything I did was boring.
Mm-hmm.
And I can sort of half agree with it, but I actually find writing some code to solve a problem exciting. It's a bit like doing a crossword puzzle, but she didn't. And so, yeah, Colin does boring stuff. And there's a bit of
Just write
embarrassment.
code.
It's an actuary or a data scientist.
Mm.
Yeah. But one day, one of the best things about moving into broader fields, I got involved in healthcare, as you've
Mm.
mentioned right at the beginning.
Mm.
And I was doing something that was about measuring the volume of the left ventricle of a heart. I was lucky enough to chat to a researcher in Singapore about this. But We wanted to automate that because these highly skilled heart specialists waste half an hour every time an MRI comes in, measuring, like they're literally drawing on the MRI and
Wow.
using. You spend hundreds of thousands training these people, and then they're doing some stupid manual task. So I was automating that, and you get an
Mm.
MRI. And I wrote a blog about this, and I got the MRIs and I turned them into a video of the heart beating, and
Wow.
it's showing where the left ventricle is as it goes in and out. And my wife saw this as I am publishing it. Oh, wow, what is that? All of a sudden, she's excited because
Mm.
there's something visual. And I tell her it's the heart. Oh, yeah, it is the heart. What's that bit there that you've highlighted? And it reminded me that my communication style was far too oral. It
Mm.
was about sounds, it was about voice,
Mm.
tone of voice. And I had to go back to, I've got to get more visual again. And it's not,
Mm.
doesn't come naturally to me, but I've had to work on it.
Mm. Mm.
So you've got to communicate in the way, in a style that matters to your audience, not to you.
Mm.
So you see all those PowerPoint slides that are full of words.
Mm.
Even I cringe at that.
Mm. Mm. So Colin, it sounds like you've been, and I say sounds like because I was trained as a telephone counselor. So we've always got our own kind of
Mm, mm,
biases and
mm.
and go-tos, I suppose, even though I can see you here on the screen. But from what I'm hearing, from what you're saying today, it sounds like what's really important in terms of communication and some of the things you've learnt from marketing is about understanding your audience. Not only
Yeah.
what matters to them, but how do they want to consume information? Is it visually? Is it by listening to you? Is it something else? How can you grab their attention?
And what's intuitive to them,
Mm,
particularly when we're dealing with complexity, it's not
mm,
intuitive. So
mm.
one of the big lessons I've learned is start with something they do understand and care
Yep,
about.
yep,
Just start with something in common.
yep. Something relatable, something simple, something we can
Yeah.
all relate to. Yeah, and then build from
Ah,
there.
start with something that gets them nodding their head.
Yeah, yeah. Some great lessons from marketing there, Colin. Thank you, and some great stories that you've shared with us today as well. So thank you for sharing that. I want to finish our conversation today with one question, Colin, and it's this: what's your top tip for actuaries wanting to build C-suite trust in AI?
You've got to remember that as scary as the C-suite are, they're human. They're just human like you. They're trying to get through life that even though they look powerful, they've still got fears, they've still got biases, they're just as likely to have been affected by the very last meeting they're in. But unlike you, one big difference is they are accustomed to being powerful. So you need to let them keep that power. Um, Even if they're not powerful, even if they're not even allowed to be powerful, like the case of the reserving, they're not allowed to choose the reserves. But if you're going to get trust from them, you're going to have to deal with how are you aligned with their interests. Now, sometimes you're not, but you've got to find a way of making it look aligned, even when you're not. You know, the scariest thing I've ever done is tell a deputy CEO that he's breaking the law. But you know, he goes, I thought you were on my side. And I go, I am. I'm trying to stop you breaking the law and stop
Trying to
getting
help
in
you.
trouble. Yeah. But his idea of being aligned was cheering him on.
Mm,
No.
a yes man.
So you've got to, but you've got to try and push. Look, you know, um, I'm doing this to save you. You know,
Mm, mm,
um, you've got to, and there's a ton of research now about AI about what we call algorithmic aversion. And it's research in psychology about the biases we have that we judge AI more harshly than we judge humans. We react more strongly when an AI makes a mistake.
mm.
And some of the research coming out of two big things I like out of that. One is the more detail you show, the less people trust.
Interesting.
And the second is give people some control over the outcome. And it turns out the good news from the research is it can be trivial control that hardly makes any difference. But as long as you give them some, they feel in control. Give them 0.5% of wiggle room, and it makes no material difference to the answer, but they feel like they're in control and it makes them trust the process.
Some great advice there, Colin. Give them a bit of control so that you can help to build some trust. Fantastic, really exciting to see this space growing and the use of AI growing as well. And really great to hear your tips, lessons, and reflections on how we can build C-suite trust in AI today. Colin, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much for inviting me. As you can tell from my tone of voice, I'm very passionate about this.
I can see that. Thanks, Colin.